next section of Russell's talk is entitled How the Churches Have Retarded Progress, or How They've Slowed Down Progress. But the first question that we have to ask is, what is progress? You know, we hear a lot of people talking about progress all the time, but rarely do they say progress towards what? I mean, Hitler did what he did in the name of progress, right? He was trying to move society along to its next stage of evolution. So we should be clear about what we really mean by progress. And then, you know, is that progress? Is this goal that we have in mind really progress or not? And what makes it progress or not? He doesn't go into that. He doesn't define it. He just starts talking about progress and how the church has retarded it. And he gives the example of a woman married to a syphilitic man. And thankfully, the church does not force her to have syphilitic children. They could separate or they could abstain, the woman and the man. They don't have to produce children. That's not a rule. So what he's doing is he's betraying an oversimplification of Catholic teaching. He doesn't understand what the church really teaches. And he does a lot of name calling, which is ad hominem, it's red herring, it's any number of logical fallacies. Then he makes the statement that the morality of the churches has nothing to do with happiness. Thankfully, that's the exact opposite of what the church teaches, that God wants us to be happy. And the moral rules that we have in place are there for us to become happy. You know, all theologians, and this is going back to the philosophers even from ancient Greece and Rome, they talked about virtue as the guidelines for true joy and happiness. So the rules that are given to us in the church are given because they have to do with character, with virtue, and that virtue leads us to real, true, lasting happiness and joy. And if we look at the joy of the saints, if you look at the people that the church holds up, the joy practically drips off the pages of the writings by the saints and about the saints. So he's contradicting the information that's there and the historical result of people who have followed those moral guidelines. And he refers again to the morality as a certain narrow set of rules of conduct. But it's really not very narrow at all. I mean, it may contradict with things that he wants to do or with some modern people want to do. But again, look at the variety of the saints. All these people followed the virtues as best they could, but we get all different types of personalities, this wide variety of people. On the other hand, it's the people who give into the opposite of the church's morality that somehow look all the same, just these hedonists. And the fact, again, is that it's not about the rules. It's about character. It's about virtue and reaching that full potential that we can become. And that this leads to happiness. And then he says, you know, the churches have retarded progress. Well, have they? You know, first of all, take a look historically at the church. The church is responsible for things like public hospitals. The church was convinced that every person has dignity and value. We all have bodies, and so everyone has the right to health care, to receive care when they're sick or they need some medical attention. And they taught the world that every person has dignity and value. This idea is not present in every culture. It gets introduced with Christianity, that every person has dignity and value, no matter what social status somebody might have. Free public education. The church taught that everybody deserves an education. Everybody should be able to think critically because every human being has a mind. And so the church started providing free public education in the Middle Ages, right? Same time as public hospitals. The universities we know it today, again, this valuing of the mind, this valuing of the intellect came from the church. Also the birth of science. Where did science develop? It developed in Europe in the Middle Ages. That's where the philosophical groundwork was laid, because what do you need in order to have science? You need to have an orderly universe, right? Even if you only have probabilities, that's still orderly enough that you can have equations describing that. And you need to have a real universe, not an imaginary one. So there's got to be intellect there, and it's got to be real. And that was provided for in terms of the worldview of Christianity. Also, everything that was good in ancient Greece and Rome was preserved by the church in the Middle Ages, and then produced hundreds of years of music and artwork and architecture and literature from which the so-called Enlightenment and Renaissance was able to be born. If it hadn't been for the church, there wouldn't have been the same type, at least, of Renaissance and Enlightenment. They had stuff to work with. They had this preservation of and contribution to Western civilization to then start doing their own thing.